Try to run, try to hide, close the door to the other side, close the door to the other side, close the door, close the door. No, wait a minute, that was break on through to the other side. By the doors, wasn't it? Okay, well, it's been a few years. But anyway, the problem was my life had come to a halt, and all I could see was darkness. I literally had nowhere to run and nowhere to hide from these dark feelings and thoughts regarding this issue. Something had to give, and something finally did give. It was over 20 years ago, later, that I looked back and I realized actually what gave. 20 plus years later, I began to recall how I was finally able to cope. In 1978, since I wasn't able to handle thinking about this, I still had my services. The only way I was able to engage in those services is that when I had to do my service, I had to just forcefully push all the thought about this out of my mind. And when I did, I was able to again concentrate on my other services, the deity worship or the Fate Museum project. But it wasn't quick. It took months. But each time the thoughts and all those dark feelings and unanswered questions would come up, I would force it back down. The darkness come up, I'd immediately push it down again, pushing it down into some closet deep within my mind. Then after months, one day I pushed them down into that closet one last time, and I closed the door on them. Finally, my memory of this and all the dark unanswered questions, all the dark feelings just stopped coming anymore. I was finally free to continue on with my devotional life and serving Srila Prabhupada and his mission, and being able to take the association of the good devotees who were still serving Srila Prabhupada, engaged in ISKCON and serving Srila Prabhupada. And that was finally how I came to cope with this. But none of those answers had been resolved. Nothing about this had been resolved. The dark issues that were facing me were still there, but they were buried deep within. And I had just closed the door on it. And once I had done that, I could finally have some normalcy of life again. But in the back of my mind, I always knew something, or practically everything, about this issue was wrong. But the darkness of those haunting, unanswered questions as to what Srila Prabhupada really wanted, that had been totally blocked out from my thoughts, at least for 20 years. They stayed and remained totally buried down within my subconsciousness. I read about this much later in life, how this is a common way people deal with traumatic events when they simply can't handle it at the time. They just block it out and put the whole trauma into a dark closet within them. It's part of our natural built-in survival skills. Actually, when I first heard about it, it was about a person, a lady who was, young lady, well, she was, I think, almost 30 years old. And she had been raped by her stepfather when she was young, like 13 or something. And it was so traumatic for her, she had blocked it all out. And I thought, how can that be? How can it be, if something is so major happens in your life, how can you just block it out? I thought it wasn't something you could do, but actually it's part of our survival skills. When you can't deal with something, it's so traumatic, and there's just no way you can deal with it at that time. You just have to bury it. And that's what happened with me in this incident. However, many times the memory, and in these situations, many times the trauma of that memory does resurface, sometimes decades later. And as you'll see, again, this is what happened with me.